What if I told you that over 500 rock and roll musicians have lost their lives in tragic accidents, from fiery plane crashes to deadly stampedes, from a doomed plane ride with Buddy Holly to a concert-turned-massacre at the Bataclan? Here are 20 worst fatal accidents in rock and roll history. 1. The plane crash that took the life of Buddy Holly. On a freezing night in February, 3 rising music stars boarded a small plane in Mason City, Iowa. Buddy Holly, Ritchie Valens, and J.P. the Big Bopper Richardson hoped to escape their broken-down tour bus and reach their next stop faster. Holly arranged the flight, Valens won his seat in a coin toss, and Richardson took the spot of Waylon Jennings, who later regretted a joking goodbye. But the night held a terrible fate. The young pilot, only 21, struggled to fly through the snowstorm. He became disoriented and lost control. The plane spun downward and crashed into a frozen field near Clear Lake, Iowa. The wreckage lay scattered in the snow. Holly was just 22, Valens only 17, and Richardson 28. Their lives ended in seconds. 2. The Altamont Free Concert Disaster. What was supposed to be a great music festival turned into a nightmare. On December 6th, nearly 300,000 people gathered at Altamont Speedway to see the Rolling Stones and other famous bands. Instead of professional security, the event organizers paid the Hells Angels motorcycle gang with beer to keep the peace. It was a terrible mistake. As the crowd grew wild, an 18-year-old named Meredith Hunter stood near the stage. Some say he had a gun. Others believe he was just caught in the chaos. Either way, a Hells Angel attacked him, stabbing him over and over as the music continued. Cameras captured the horror. 4 people were dead, 2 hit by cars, 1 drowned, and Hunter stabbed to death in front of thousands. The dream of peace and love that defined the 1960s died that night too. The film Gimme Shelter recorded the terror, showing Mick Jagger's shocked expression. The decade did not end with joy, but with blood. 3. The Lynyrd Skynyrd plane crash. Fame can be dangerous. For Lynyrd Skynyrd, it came at a terrible cost. On October 20th, 1977, the band flew in a worn-out Convair CV-240. They had just played in South Carolina and were heading to Louisiana. But the plane was running out of fuel and disaster was near. Just minutes before landing, the engines died. The lights went out. Silence filled the cabin. The plane lost control, crashing through the trees in Mississippi. The impact was brutal. Lead singer Ronnie Van Zant, guitarist Steve Gaines, and backup singer Cassie Gaines died instantly. The pilots and a crew member also lost their lives. Some survivors managed to crawl from the wreckage, injured and bleeding. They stumbled through the swamp, looking for help. But instead of rescue, they were met by locals with shotguns who thought they were trespassers. Hours passed before help finally arrived. For some, it was too late. Just days before, the band had released Street Survivors. The album cover showed them surrounded by flames, a haunting image. Out of respect, the artwork was later changed. But the question remains, was it just a tragic accident or something more? The band continued, but a piece of their soul was lost in that swamp forever. 4. The Bataclan Massacre. A night of music turned into horror on November 13, 2015. At the Bataclan Concert Hall in Paris, fans of Eagles of Death Metal gathered for a night of fun. But the joy turned to terror when 3 gunmen burst in, armed with rifles and bombs. Without warning, they started shooting. People tried to escape, but there was nowhere to go. Some hid under bodies, pretending to be dead. The attackers moved calmly, reloading and firing again. Many were shot at close range. Others were crushed in the chaos. For more than 2 hours, the attackers held the crowd hostage. The gunfire was deafening, broken only by screams. The band escaped, but their merchandise manager, Nick Alexander, was taken the life of. Finally, security forces stormed the building. 2 attackers blew themselves up. The 3rd was shot. The massacre was over, but the damage was done. The Metallica bus accident. On September 27, 1986, Metallica's tour bus was driving through Sweden after a show in Stockholm. The band was heading to Copenhagen when disaster struck. The bus suddenly swerved off the road and flipped. 24-year-old bassist Cliff Burton was thrown from his bunk and crushed. He died instantly. The cause of the crash is still debated. The driver said the road was icy, but singer James Hetfield found no ice when he checked. Some believe the driver was too tired or made a mistake. The cruelest part? Burton's spot in the bunk was decided by a card game. He won the game and took the bunk from guitarist Kirk Hammett, sealing his fate. Burton's death shook the metal world. Metallica had just released Master of Puppets and was on the rise. The band had to decide whether to continue or stop. They chose to move forward, but they never forgot him. His bass playing still inspires fans, and people visit the crash site to honor him. 6. The plane crash that took the life of Stevie Ray Vaughan. On August 26, 1990, blues guitar legend Stevie Ray Vaughan played an electrifying show at Alpine Valley Music Theater in Wisconsin. It was a night of celebration. Vaughan had conquered addiction, revitalized his career, and stood alongside musical greats like Eric Clapton, Buddy Guy, and Robert Cray. The concert ended with a powerful encore, featuring an all-star jam session that felt like a defining moment in rock history. As the night ended, Vaughan was eager to return to Chicago. A fleet of helicopters was waiting to transport the musicians and crew. Initially, Clapton's team was assigned multiple seats, but a last-minute change freed one up. Vaughan took that seat. The fog was dense, and the pilot, unfamiliar with the terrain, had limited visibility. Just after midnight, the helicopter lifted off, but failed to clear a nearby ski slope. The aircraft crashed into the hillside less than a mile from the venue. The wreckage remained undiscovered until morning. All 5 people aboard, including Vaughan, were taken instantly. He was only 35 years old. The music world was stunned. Vaughan's resurgence in the blues scene had been meteoric, his raw, soulful playing bringing new life to the genre. He had defeated his personal demons only to be taken in an instant. His guitar, which once wailed with fire and emotion, would never be heard again. Eric Clapton, who had nearly boarded the same helicopter, was devastated. Bandmates and fans were in shock. Memorial services were held across the country, and tributes poured in from musicians of all genres. Vaughan's influence only grew after his death. His albums soared in sales, his guitar work studied by generations of musicians. His tragic death became a haunting reminder of how quickly fate can turn, even for those at their peak. Today, his legacy endures, his fiery playing forever immortalized in recordings and the memories of those who witnessed his brilliance live. 7. The Who concert tragedy in Cincinnati. On a cold December night in 1979, thousands of excited fans gathered outside Riverfront Coliseum in Cincinnati to see the famous rock band, The Who. The concert had general admission seating, meaning those who got inside first could grab the best spots. The crowd was eager, pushing forward as they waited for the doors to open. Suddenly, a sound from inside the venue, just a sound check, made people think the concert had started. Panic spread, and the crowd surged forward. The doors had barely opened, creating a dangerous bottleneck. People at the front were crushed against the glass, unable to breathe. The force of the crowd lifted some off their feet, trapping them. Screams for help were lost in the chaos. 11 people died, crushed under the weight of the pushing crowd. Many others collapsed, struggling for air. Inside, the band had no idea what was happening. As The Who took the stage, the audience cheered, unaware of the tragedy outside. Security was overwhelmed and reacted too late. The band played their final song before learning about the disaster. This tragedy led to major changes in concert safety. Many cities banned festival-style seating and enforced stricter crowd control rules to prevent future disasters. Investigations found that poor security, bad planning, and a failure to communicate with fans had turned an exciting night into a nightmare. Survivors described the terror of being trapped in a crowd they could not escape. Families mourned loved ones who had gone to enjoy music but never returned home. Decades later, The Who returned to Cincinnati, dedicating their performance to the victims. Families gathered to remember those lost. Band members Roger Daltrey and Pete Townshend spoke of their deep sorrow, still haunted by that night. Cincinnati would never forget. A night meant for music had become a painful lesson about the dangers of uncontrolled crowds. More than just a guitar player, Duane Allman was a rising star. By 24, he had already helped shape Southern rock with his slide guitar. His band, the Allman Brothers, was changing music forever. But talent doesn't stop tragedy. On an October afternoon in 1971, he rode his Harley-Davidson through familiar streets. In Macon, Georgia, this was his home, where he and his band made music that would last for generations. But that day, danger waited on the road. As he sped down Hillcrest Avenue, a flatbed truck suddenly turned left in front of him. Allman swerved to avoid it, but his tires loose grip. The motorcycle flipped, throwing him hard onto the pavement. People ran to help. He was awake, but the damage was severe. His internal injuries were too much. Hours later, he died. The music world was in shock. The Allman Brothers had lost their leader in an instant. Fans mourned a guitarist who had so much more to give. But fate wasn't done yet. 1 year later, tragedy struck again. Bassist Barry Oakley, Allman's close friend and bandmate, crashed his motorcycle just 3 blocks from where Allman had fallen. The circumstances were eerily similar. Another sharp turn, another fatal crash. Some called it bad luck. Others spoke of a curse. Despite their heartbreak, the Allman Brothers kept playing. Their pain poured into their music, captured in songs like Little Martha, Allman's final gift. His influence never faded. His fiery guitar still echoes through time. Fans visit his grave at Rose Hill Cemetery, leaving guitar picks, whiskey bottles, and flowers. A rock star beyond music, Mark Bolan helped define glam rock with his band T-Rex. Songs like Bang a Gong, Get It On, and 20th Century Boy made him famous, along with his flashy style, glitter, scarves, and platform boots. He lived for music, but one fear haunted him: cars. That night, he and his girlfriend, Gloria Jones, were in a Mini 1275 GT driving through Barnes, London. They had just left a celebration for their latest music work. The streets were wet, and the curve on Queen's Ride was dangerous. Jones was driving when the car suddenly lost control. It skidded off the road and crashed into a sycamore tree. The impact was devastating. Bolan, in the passenger seat, took the worst of the crash. His head hit the dashboard, and he died instantly. Jones survived but was badly injured. When she woke up, she couldn't remember what happened, only that Bolan was gone. The music world was in shock. He had spent his life avoiding cars, yet he died in one. Fans soon noticed eerie coincidences in his songs. In Solid Gold Easy Action, he sang "Easy as picking foxes from a tree." The fact that his car hit a tree made fans shiver. In Ballrooms of Mars, he hinted at unseen forces shaping fate. The sycamore tree became a shrine. Fans from all over the world visited, leaving flowers, notes, and messages carved into the bark. Even decades later, the site remains sacred to glam rock lovers. What started as a night of music turned into horror on June 30th, 2000. The Roskilde Festival in Denmark was packed with over 50,000 fans, all excited to see Pearl Jam perform. But hidden beneath the excitement was danger. Heavy rain had soaked the ground, turning it into thick, slippery mud. As the band started playing, the crowd surged forward, pressing against the barriers. People at the front had no way to escape. Some lost their footing and fell, trapped beneath the crowd. The music drowned out their cries for help. Security first thought it was just normal concert energy. But this was different. Panic spread. People struggled to breathe. Pearl Jam's lead singer, Eddie Vedder, saw something was wrong and begged the crowd to move back. But it was too late. By the time the chaos ended, 9 young men had died, crushed by the weight of the crowd. The shock spread beyond Roskilde. Survivors were left traumatized, and Pearl Jam was devastated. Some band members thought about quitting music. Instead, they fought for better concert safety. Music festivals around the world made new rules for crowd control and emergency response. For those who were there, the nightmare never faded. The mud, the crushing pressure, the helplessness, it became one of rock's darkest moments, a reminder that even music can turn deadly. 11. Eddie Cochran's last ride. A rising rock star, Eddie Cochran's journey ended too soon. On April 16, 1960, after finishing a show in Bristol, England, he got into a taxi with his fiancée, Sharon Sheely, and friend, Gene Vincent. They were tired, but happy. No one knew what was coming next. The taxi sped down the A4 highway. The driver lost control. Tires screeched. The car swerved and crashed into a lamppost. The force of the crash threw Cochran from the car. He hit the ground hard. Sheely and Vincent were hurt, but Cochran's injuries were worse. He was rushed to a hospital, but doctors couldn't save him. He was only 21. One of rock's brightest young stars was gone. The music world was in shock. He had helped shape rock's rebellious spirit, inspiring future legends like the Beatles and the Rolling Stones. But his voice was silenced forever. His friend, Gene Vincent, never fully recovered, physically or emotionally. The accident haunted him, and his career faded. The taxi driver, found guilty of reckless driving, lost his license, but no punishment could undo the tragedy. Even today, fans visit the crash site, leaving tributes to the lost rock pioneer. His music still plays, a reminder of a talent taken too soon. But the question remains, how many more stars would be lost on the road before the lesson was learned? 12. Ricky Nelson's last flight. More than a teen idol, Ricky Nelson had worked hard to earn respect as a musician. By the time he boarded a private plane on December 31, 1985, he had mastered a fresh blend of rock and country. He was flying to a New Year's Eve concert in Texas, ready to perform, but he never made it. Somewhere over Texas, smoke filled the cabin. The sharp smell of burning metal choked the passengers. Panic set in. The pilots fought for control, searching for a safe place to land. The plane, an old Douglas DC-3, became a deadly trap as flames spread fast. The pilots managed to land in a field near DeKalb, Texas, but the moment the plane touched down, it exploded. Fire engulfed the wreckage in seconds. Nelson, his fiancée, Helen Blair, and 5 band members died. The pilots survived but suffered severe burns and haunting memories. Rumors swirled, substances, sabotage, foul play. But the truth was sadder. A broken heater had caught fire, setting the cabin ablaze. A small malfunction had sealed their fate. Nelson's death wasn't just another rock tragedy. He had bridged the gap between 1950s rock and 1980s country. His loss left a void in music, a silence where songs should have been. His influence lived on, but so did the image of his final moments, the burning wreckage, the helpless screams, a legend lost too soon. 13. Jim Croce's last flight. A quiet night in Natchitoches, Louisiana, was shattered by metal and fire. A small Beechcraft E-18 carrying Jim Croce, a rising folk rock star, barely lifted off before crashing into a grove of pecan trees. The wreckage burned in the dark. No one survived. At just 30 years old, Croce was at the peak of his career. His songs, full of heartache and stories, touched millions. That night, he had finished a show and was eager to go home. But fate had other plans. The pilot, who had depth perception issues, misjudged the takeoff. The overloaded plane never had a chance. Hours before the crash, Croce had written a letter to his wife, promising to leave the road behind and focus on family. He never got to keep that promise. After his death, Time in a Bottle, a song for his son, topped the charts. His last album was released after he was gone, securing his place in music history. 14. The República Cromañón fire. The República Cromañón in Buenos Aires was packed beyond its limit when tragedy struck. Someone in the crowd set off a flare, and in seconds, the ceiling caught fire. Flames spread fast. Thick black smoke filled the air, choking everyone inside. What was supposed to be a night of music turned into a nightmare. Panic took over. People ran for the exits, but the doors were locked to stop unpaid guests from sneaking in. Smoke filled their lungs. Some collapsed. Others were crushed in the desperate fight to escape. Families who came to enjoy music together never made it out. By the time firefighters put out the fire, the horror was clear. Nearly 200 people had died. More than 1,000 were injured. Some victims were just kids. Later, investigators uncovered the awful truth. Greed and corruption had led to this tragedy. Officials had taken bribes to ignore safety violations. The club should never have been open. The disaster shook the country. Laws changed. Nightclubs faced strict safety rules, but for the families of the victims, nothing could bring back their loved ones. Every year, they remember that night, a scar on Argentina's history. Could it all have been prevented? 15. The Station Nightclub fire. The Station nightclub in West Warwick, Rhode Island, was full of energy as Great White took the stage. Then, in seconds, everything went wrong. The band's fireworks sent sparks into the air. The club's cheap soundproofing foam caught fire instantly. Flames spread up the walls and across the ceiling. Smoke thickened, heat rose, people screamed. They ran, but too many had nowhere to go. Hundreds rushed to the exits. The front door became a death trap, bodies piling up as people tried to escape. Others collapsed, poisoned by the smoke. Firefighters arrived quickly, but by then, the building was beyond saving. 100 people died, including the band's guitarist. Over 200 more were badly burned or injured. Survivors spoke of crawling over bodies, gasping for air, and feeling the unbearable heat closing in. Investigators uncovered a long list of failures. The club had no sprinklers. Its walls were covered in flammable material. Safety rules had been ignored. The club owners and the band's tour manager were held responsible, but no punishment could erase the pain. New fire safety laws were put in place to prevent another tragedy. But the memories of that night remain, a chilling reminder of how quickly celebration can turn to horror. As Oakley sped forward, a city bus suddenly loomed ahead. There was no time to stop. The crash sent him flying onto the pavement. Stunned but standing, he waved off help, insisting he was fine. No one knew the damage inside his head was growing worse by the minute. Hours later, his body gave out. At the hospital, doctors confirmed the worst: severe brain trauma. By nightfall, he was gone. The Allman Brothers Band never fully recovered. Oakley was buried next to Duane in Rose Hill Cemetery. Fans still gather there, wondering if their deaths were just tragic accidents or something more. Could it be fate, or was there a darker force tied to the soul of Southern rock? 17. Mark Sandman's final song. A summer night in Italy. The crowd pulsed with excitement as morphine filled the air with hypnotic rhythms. At center stage, Mark Sandman gripped his two-string bass, his deep voice cutting through the humid night. He lived for moments like this, but death was waiting nearby. As the music peaked, Sandman wavered. His legs gave out. He collapsed. At first, the crowd thought it was part of the act. Then panic set in. Medics rushed in, but it was too late. His heart had stopped. 18. The fire that took the music. The Beverly Hills Supper Club in Kentucky was a place of music, laughter, and luxury. But one night in May, it became a deadly trap. A fire took the lives of 165 people who never saw it coming. That evening, more than 1,000 people packed the club for a night of fun. But hidden behind the bright lights, danger was growing. Old, faulty wires ran through the walls, heating up hour by hour. No alarms, no warnings. Just a quiet disaster waiting to happen. When the fire finally broke out, it spread fast. Smoke filled the air. Flames swallowed the building, blocking exits and turning hallways into deadly traps. Some doors wouldn't open. Some didn't even exist. Panic spread. People were crushed in the rush to escape. Others got lost in the thick smoke. By the time firefighters stopped the flames, it was too late. After the fire, the truth came out. This disaster could have been avoided. Safety rules had been ignored. Exits had been blocked. Warnings had been missed. The fire wasn't just a freak accident. It was a tragedy waiting to happen. Even today, people say the club is haunted. Some claim to hear ghostly voices or see shadowy figures moving through the ruins. Are they real or just memories of a terrible night? One thing is certain, the fire was a warning. A warning that came too late for those who just wanted to enjoy a night of music, but instead met their end in the flames. Tragedy and music have crossed paths many times. Is it all just bad luck? Or is there something darker lurking beneath the stage, waiting for its next victim? 19. The Ghost Inside's Fatal Crash. November 19th, a night of silence shattered by metal crashing. The Ghost Inside, a band known for powerful music, faced horror on U.S. Highway 62. A semi-truck came out of the dark, slamming into their tour bus. The crash was instant, brutal, and deadly. Both drivers died on impact. The band's bus, once full of music and dreams, lay in pieces under the Texas sky. Inside, everything was chaos. Metal twisted, glass broke, and bodies were thrown. Then came silence, then screams. Drummer Andrew Tuckachick lost his right leg, broke his spine, and was barely alive. Singer Jonathan Vigil gasped for air, his back broken, his ankle crushed. Guitarist Zach Johnson's legs were wrecked beyond recognition. The bassist and crew hovered between pain and darkness. Surviving wasn't the end. It was just the start of their hardest battle. They spent months in surgeries, therapy, and pain. Tuckachick had to relearn how to stand, walk, and hold drumsticks. Vigil feared he might never sing again. Johnson wasn't sure if he would ever walk, let alone play guitar. Their bodies were broken, but their spirits fought on. Then, years later, they won. July 2019, the Shrine Auditorium in Los Angeles. A sold-out crowd waited, holding their breath. The first note played. It wasn't just music, it was defiance. They had survived. They stood, scarred but strong. In 2020, their new album came out, filled with their pain and triumph. The crash had tried to end them, but they refused to disappear. They wouldn't have chosen this path, but they found something powerful. Resilience, forged in fire. 20. Jim Reeves' last flight. July 31st. A storm rolled in. A voice was lost forever. Jim Reeves, a country music legend, unknowingly stepped into his final moments that day. He loved flying. It made him feel free. But the sky is unforgiving. It does not care for fame. Reeves piloted his Beechcraft Debonair toward Nashville as dark clouds gathered. Winds roared, thick fog swallowed the sky, and visibility vanished. Nature turned against him, and his small plane was caught in the storm's grip. People on the ground watched in horror. The plane twisted, circled wildly, like a bird trapped in an invisible hand. Then it dropped. No explosion, no fire, just a crash. Metal crumpled in the dense Tennessee woods. Silence followed. For 2 days, the world waited. Search teams scoured the forest, clinging to hope. Then they found it, the wreckage hidden beneath thick trees. Reeves and his business manager, Dean Manuel, lay still. Their journey had ended in an unknown patch of earth. The music world was in shock. The voice that had comforted millions was gone. But death could not silence Jim Reeves. His music lived on, untouched by time. His albums soared in sales. His songs refused to fade. Even in death, he climbed the charts. In 1967, the Country Music Hall of Fame cemented his legacy. His smooth voice and heartfelt lyrics shaped country music's future. Decades later, his sound still influenced new artists. A storm took Jim Reeves from the sky, but his voice still drifts through the wind. His songs remain, whispering through time. Can a legend ever truly die?